Great day, Newlies. My name is Kenya Nunez, and we are in part 4 of our Forgiveness in Marriage series. Today, I pose this question. What happens when "I'm sorry" is not cutting it anymore? You're tired of hearing it because you don't believe that it's true. The phrase has been diminished over time because action hasn't been put in place. "I'm sorry" can be very powerful words. If you've been waiting for an apology for a long time and somebody finally is humble enough and aware enough and mindful enough of you to say it, that can turn an entire relationship around for the better. "I'm sorry" can hold so much weight when it is heartfelt, genuine, and is followed up with an action that suggests, "I'll do my best not to do it again." When we've thought about that offense and how it affected the other person and we don't want to continue to have that same effect on them, "I'm sorry" can show how mindful we are of the other person. These words can lift a burden, shift the conversation, open the door to positive and permanent change, create self-awareness, introduce harmony, and reinforce humility. Sometimes all the situation calls for is an "I'm sorry." But there can come a point where "I'm sorry" loses its luster, carries no weight, and means nothing. Without action, it can feel like a slap in the face. When it's the 15th time addressing the issue, or you've been offended by a certain action or inactivity for years, a simple "I'm sorry" might not do the trick. I found myself on both ends of this coin, looking for a change after receiving an apology and giving an apology and not changing. I read a word of great wisdom one time that said, "My little children, let us not love in word, neither in tongue, but in deed and in truth." It can become second nature in a marriage to throw "I'm sorry" around and not mean it. And when you are on the receiving end, you desperately want to know that the apology stretches further than just those two words. The thing about forgiveness is we're supposed to forgive whether the person says "I'm sorry" or not. And in a marriage, that seems even harder to put into action. Okay, I forgave that action a few times, but it continues. And after a while, we start to get irritated hearing "I'm sorry" because it sounds like a lie. You begin to think your spouse must not really be sorry because if they were, they wouldn't do that anymore, or whatever I'm looking to see done would get done. Forgiveness is a part of the love that we show, but so is making changes after we've done something wrong. So what do we do if we're tired of the "I'm sorries"? Well, we communicate. Sure, we don't want to make excuses for people, but in a marriage, like any other relationship, we need to have compassion and understanding. For example, if your husband grew up as an only child, maybe he's developed some selfish habits. These are habits that have affected the way he looks at money and spending. Based on the current budget, you've told him to hold off on any additional spending because it hurts some of the overall goals. He goes and buys a video game console and some games for himself. He says he's sorry, but a week later spends money on some other out-of-budget item. In this scenario, the apology probably feels ineffective after a while, but the wife may need to sit back and think about the kind of life her husband led prior to getting married. She should not excuse the behavior, but she should also know that this may take a while to work through. They both will need to communicate about how this behavior can be changed. Furthermore, communicating will give the husband an opportunity to explain his rationing. Maybe he was an only child, but he grew up in a single-family home and his mother couldn't afford to buy him such games. Or maybe he can confess that the wife's concerns about the money went in one ear and out the other. This scenario could take a million different turns. The point is, effective communication must be had. Now, it's my thought that repeat offenses are common in marriage. You spend 2, 10, 20 years with someone, they're bound to make the same mistake again. You both have to learn to forgive, show grace, and continue to work through it. And if you're struggling with the work through part, get some help. Get a mediator, try prayer, get counseling, whatever it takes to get to a resolution. When it comes to forgiveness in marriage, action needs to be taken on both sides. Why? Because we are constantly bouncing between being the offender and being the offended. Communication Communication is key because you may need to say to your husband, look, this is a problem for me and this is why. And I get it, right? Because sometimes we think I shouldn't have to say this anymore and he should just know. Well, that's a fairy tale. That's fairy tale stuff and get over it. Sometimes you'll be saying the same thing for years before you see any discernible change. But have faith that it will change. That same book of wisdom says, but wilt thou know, O vain man, that faith without works is dead. Like everything else in your marriage, forgiveness and change takes work and faith. I guarantee there are plenty of things that your husband is waiting on you to do differently. Have faith and put in the work to be patient and listen and work through the changes, make suggestions, take suggestions, disagree, but whatever works towards that resolution. Well, newlies, this conversation could go on and on. I'm sure you have plenty of stories and examples of how "and I'm sorry" fell flat. Please share with me the effect that these words have had on your marriage. Coming up in the series, we have more insight from my husband, and we'll be looking at what forgiveness looks like when we're the ones in need of mercy. Until next week, much love to you, God bless, and we'll see you right here on Forever Newlywed.